There was a Canon camcorder that was in the kitchen area, a Dell laptop computer from the living room area, a USB cable from the third bedroom or office area, and an Apple Store receipt from the same third bedroom.
And as part of this investigation, did you and other officers look into basically the trash collection schedule?
Yes.
And did you participate with Detective Hall and Agent Galloway there at the waste management transfer site?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And in terms of Grant and Amanda Hayes, had you learned in the investigation that they, in fact, had made a trip to Texas?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you part of drawing up a search warrant for their persons related to Grant and Amanda Hayes?
Yes, ma'am.
And when was that executed?
That was executed on July 22nd.
And where was that executed?
It was executed at 1505 Holman Street in Kinston, which is the residence of Grant Hayes' parents.
And prior to your arrival with the search warrant, were other Raleigh officers in place to basically give you information about where Grant and Amanda were located?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall about what time it was that you arrived to execute the search warrant at 1505 Holman Street?
It was executed at 8:45 p.m.
And you indicated that you went to Holman Street. Did you actually execute the search warrant there at that address?
That's where it was originally executed, and then we, to actually serve it and process Grant and Amanda Hayes, we transported them to the Lenoir County Jail.
And when you arrived at the 1505 Holman Street, were Grant and Amanda present at the time that you arrived?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have any interaction with them at that point?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you explain why you were there?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you tell them?
I told them that we had 3 search warrants. We had one for Grant Hayes, one for Amanda Hayes, and one for their Dodge Durango. We needed to serve those and just explain the process of what we needed to collect.
And did you indicate the reason for the search warrant, what crime you were investigating?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you tell them?
We were investigating a homicide.
And did you identify the victim of the homicide?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you tell them it was Laura Ackerson's homicide that you were investigating?
Yes, ma'am. And I think I may have misspoke, on the 22nd at this time, we had not recovered any body parts for Laura Ackerson. So actually at that time it was still a missing person investigation.
So you, on the 22nd, when you went to Holman Street, you actually told Grant and Amanda Hayes that you were investigating a missing person?
Yes, ma'am.
And that missing person was Laura Ackerson?
Yes, ma'am.
In getting from Holman Street to the Kinston Police Department, can you describe how did you transport Grant and Amanda Hayes?
Yes, we did. Since we were seizing the Dodge Durango, there was no transportation for them, and they actually had their kids there, so we made arrangements for some nearby relatives to watch the kids while we executed the search warrants. And Grant Hayes rode with Detective Hall and I, and Amanda Hayes rode with Kinston PD Detective Courtney.
Was that I mean, how long did it take you to get from Holman Street to?
Maybe 10 minutes. It was very close by.
And once you got to the Kinston Police Department, can you basically describe the process of executing the search warrant?
Yes, from both Grant and Amanda Hayes, we collected photographs, finger and palm prints, DNA saliva swabs, and we also collected some property from each of them, what they had on them.
And was that done, were they in the presence of each other, or did you have them in two different locations?
No, they were in the presence of each other.
And with regard to Grant Hayes, first of all, can you describe what items that you recovered from him?
Photographs, finger and palm prints, DNA saliva swabs, a Motorola cell phone, a copy of his North Carolina driver's license, a copy of an RBC Visa card, and some miscellaneous papers.
And the miscellaneous papers, that's items in his wallet?
Correct.
As part of those miscellaneous papers, did you recover a receipt from the Sheetz gas station?
Yes.
And do you recall the date on the Sheetz gas station receipt?
July 15th.
And did that, did you have a later opportunity to kind of look into that receipt and see what time that purchase was made, what was purchased?
Yes, ma'am.
And what information did you get from that Sheetz receipt that was found on Grant Hayes?
Give me 1 second. It was July 15th, and there were actually at 4:30 p.m. there was a purchase, and then at 5:56 p.m. there was actually another purchase at the same Sheetz.
So basically, were there more than one receipt that he had on him?
I believe there was just one receipt.
And so that receipt from the 4:30 purchase, was that for American Spirit cigarettes?
That's correct.
And was the purchase made to a card coming back to the defendant?
It was made to a card ending in 4655. And that was the one at 4:30 p.m. on the 15th.
Now, with regard to Amanda Hayes, did you go through the same process with her in terms of collecting fingerprints and palm prints?
Yes, ma'am.
And with Amanda Hayes, did you also collect the swab, basically a cheek swab from inside her mouth?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was for DNA comparison purposes?
Yes, ma'am.
What other items did you recover from Amanda Hayes?
We also recovered a Sony digital camera, 2 iPod touches, a Samsung cell phone, some keys, shoes. We copied several documents that she had, including 2 New York driver's license, an RBC Visa card, an American Express card, a Chase Visa card, a Citi MasterCard, an American Express gift card, a Scotia Bank card, her Social Security card, and a personal check that she had from Candace Rowland. And we also recovered a Target receipt and a Chick-fil-A receipt.
And as you've indicated, there were 2 New York driver's licenses as well as the various financial cards that you've identified. Were some of those in the name of Amanda Smith and some of them in the name of Amanda Hayes?
Yes, ma'am.
And the driver's license, were they in the name of Amanda Smith? indicated that there was a Target receipt that was recovered from Amanda?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And what do you recall about that Target receipt?
It was for July 16, 2011, and it was for the purchase of 2 coolers.
And you indicated there was a Chick-fil-A receipt,
Yes, ma'am.
and what do you recall about that?
It was for the date of July 13th, 2011, and it was for 2 kids' meals and 2 regular meals.
And the jury's previously been shown a video relating to a July the 13th purchase, which shows Amanda Hayes on that video. Were you able to associate that receipt with that Chick-fil-A video?
Yes, ma'am.
And with regard to kind of this investigation, and there were 2 times on the Chick-fil-A video, and apparently the receipt time didn't correspond to either one of those times. Were
Right.
you able to do some investigation and kind of get to the bottom of that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you find out?
There were 2 times I think you guys have seen on the Chick-fil-A video. One of them was actually for the VCR timestamp, and the other one's actually for the viewer timestamp, and that was the time that was closer to the actual time, but the actual time was 21 minutes ahead of that. So the actual time was 9:42 p.m. and the timestamp on the monitor showed, I believe, 9:21 p.m.
So the 9:42 that was shown on the receipt was actually the right time.
That's correct.
You indicated that you recovered from Amanda Hayes at that time a personal check from Candace Rowland.
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the check that's been introduced here in the evidence relating to a payment that Candace Rowland testified that she made to Amanda Hayes while she was in Texas?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did that process take down at the police station, kind of collecting these photographs, fingerprints, searching both Amanda Hayes and Grant Hayes? How long was that process?
From recollection, I would estimate about an hour.
And during the course of that time that you were in the presence of Grant Hayes and Amanda Hayes, did you observe any injuries to either Grant Hayes or Amanda Hayes?
No, ma'am.
At the conclusion of executing the search warrant, what happened then down at the police station?
When we were finished executing the 2 search warrants, we returned Grant and Amanda to 1505 Holman Street, and by this time the Dodge Durango had already been towed to Raleigh. It was being kept secured at one of the Raleigh PD stations, until we, Detective Hall and I, responded back to Raleigh and transported the Dodge Durango to CCBI garage.
And after the conclusion of the search warrant, did you transport Grant and Amanda Hayes in the same vehicle back to Holman Street?
No, ma'am. We transported them back the same way that we had taken them to the Lenoir County Jail.
So the defendant, Amanda Hayes, was in a car with the Kinston detectives during that trip back?
She was in a car by herself, just her and the Kinston PD detective. Yes, ma'am.
At that time, Grant Hayes was with you and Detective Hall?
Correct.
These items that you recovered or discovered with regard to Grant and Amanda Hayes on the 22nd of July, were there certain items that you seized and kept as part of that search warrant?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that include the cameras, the camera, the iPod Touch sketches, the phones,
Yes, ma'am.
and certain other documents, did you make copies of and return?
Yes, ma'am.
And what items did you, why did you do that? Some of them make copies of and return.
Well, we didn't feel like at the time that they were necessary for us to actually keep the actual item itself. Just the information from it was sufficient. Some of the items that we felt like it was necessary for us to actually seize the particular item.
With regard to like the Target receipt, Chick-fil-A receipt, sheets, gas station receipt, you collected those items?
Yes, ma'am.
Now the camera, Sony camera that you recovered, was that in Amanda Hayes' purse?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have an opportunity to go and review those photographs, which the jury has seen now, and compare them to the apartment at Bella Park Trail?
Yes, ma'am.
And with regard to looking through those photos, did you note that at an earlier date in the hall back that there was a black shower curtain and a white shower liner?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you also note that there were various smaller black rugs with kind of a tan border around those?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Okay. And when you went into the apartment on July the 20th, was the shower curtain or the liner present?
No, ma'am.
Was the rug that the jury seen by the front door, the smaller rug, was it present?
No, ma'am.
Were the two rugs from the kitchen area that were seen in the earlier photos, were they present when you went into the apartment?
No, ma'am.
In that bathroom, the jury is seeing a photograph of a Sonicare toothbrush sitting on the countertop. Was that in the bathroom when you went on July the 20th?
No, it wasn't.
Appeared to be kind of a plunger area that had like a blue handle. Was that present in the bathroom when you went on July the 20th?
No, it wasn't.
But you saw that in the earlier photographs in that bathroom area?
Yes, ma'am.
You indicated that there were various items that were not present. Did you later recover rugs that were similar to the ones that were no longer in the apartment from the trash?
Yes, ma'am.
How about that plunger with the blue handle? Did you recover that?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you recover the Sonicare toothbrush?
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Fogg, as part of this investigation, did you, working with other detectives, gather information with regard to financial transactions at or around the time of Laura Ackerson's disappearance on July the 13th,
Yes, ma'am.
2011?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe that process, what information you used to kind of compile that information?
Sure. The first bit of information were the two receipts that I just spoke of, the Target receipt and the Chick-fil-A receipt. And it was a kind of a working backwards process. So when we would find a receipt, we would then track down the transaction or try to track down the transaction. Also involved, we were able to get some bank records which showed some other transactions, so we would use the same process there and just use the bank records and then try to go get more information about these transactions that were made specifically during this time frame that we were focusing on, which was that week or two around July 13th.
And you indicated that was kind of a process of getting this information, and as more information came out of this investigation, would you then basically go and kind of follow through with that information as well?
Yes, ma'am.
For instance, during the course of this investigation, did you become aware of a skill saw manual located in the Bella Park Trail apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you become aware of that manual?
Shay Elmer, the defendant's daughter, told us about it.
And after after she indicated that it was located in the apartment, did you in fact go back with the search warrant and seize the skill saw manual?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that lead you to do any further investigation with regard to skill saws, any purchase of any skill saws around this time?
Yes, ma'am. What we did was the inside the manual was, of course, a model number, and then we contacted some local stores, which I believe we had already determined that Grant and Amanda Hayes had made some purchases at, including the Walmart, and
Sustain.
You indicated that you had recovered the skill saw manual. Did you, as a result of recovering the skill saw manual, go to a Walmart that was located at Briar Creek Shopping Center?
yes,
And where is that Briar Creek Walmart located in relation to the defendant's apartment?
that Walmart is located at 10,050 Glenwood Avenue, which I would approximate 10 minutes from the defendant's residence.
And in terms of, you have a skill saw manual, and provide you with the video from a purchase on the early morning hours of July 14th.
Yes, ma'am.
And that shows the purchase of the skill saw by a person identified as Grant Hayes.
Yes, ma'am.
And that particular purchase was made in cash, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you earlier had requested bank records for Grant Hayes and Amanda Hayes, this was not something that showed up on the bank records
That's correct.
because it was a cash purchase.
Yes, ma'am.
Taking into account that information as well as all the bank information that you received, did you compile a spreadsheet which identified transactions occurring between July the 14th of 2011 and July the 19th of 2011?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you also prepare a second spreadsheet related to items that were purchased, that you could determine were purchased either through video, financial transaction records, or receipts that were recovered?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you identify those items that were purchased and whether or not they had been recovered as part of this investigation for the relevant period?
Yes, ma'am.
May I approach the witness?
You might.
Detective Falk, I'm handing you what has been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 523 and ask if you recognize that item.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 523?
It's a spreadsheet that I created that shows information that we obtain through financial records.
And is it, you indicated it's a spreadsheet, what various information is contained on here in terms of, do you reflect the date?
Yes, ma'am. Date, time, the business, the address for the business, what type of transaction it is, the amount of the transaction, if there was any receipt associated with the transaction, and if there was any video associated with the transaction.
And so the first transaction that's indicated on State's Exhibit 523 is July the 13th of 2011, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the last one that's actually reflected on this is July the 21st of 2011, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the various information that you've indicated, the date, time, the business address, transaction, the amount, whether or not there was a receipt or video you've recorded with regard to each transaction that you've listed here, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, this time the state will move to introduce and evidence State's Exhibit 523.
Let 523 be received.
Your Honor, I'd ask that this be published to the jury. I have individual copies.
Okay. Sure, can you do that, please? All right.
Detective Falk, turn your attention to State's Exhibit 523. The first date that's reflected is July the 13th of 2011 at 9:42 p.m.
That's
See
correct.
that first line?
Yes, ma'am.
And what transaction took place as far as what business did that occur at?
That was that transaction at the Chick-fil-A that was gathered initially from the receipt that was recovered from Amanda Hayes.
And the address of that Chick-fil-A you've listed as 6612 Glenwood Avenue.
Yes, ma'am.
And where is that in relation to the defendant's apartment?
I would estimate about within 5 minutes away.
And you've indicated in the next column the transaction. What information do you have about that particular transaction?
It was a purchase using the RBC Visa card ending in 4663.
And beside that, you've got in parentheses Amanda. What,
Yeah.
what does that refer to?
That just denotes the whose card it was.
So the Visa card ending in 4663 was issued to Amanda Hayes,
Yes, ma'am.
and you've indicated an amount of this purchase,
Yes, ma'am.
and how much was that?
$22.09.
And this jury's seen that receipt earlier, but that reflected 2 adult meals, 2 kids' meals, and 4 drinks.
Yes, ma'am.
And that receipt you indicated is the one that you actually recovered from Amanda Hayes' purse. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
On July the 22nd, when you
Yes.
executed the search warrant.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the last column that you have there?
VID video.
And what have you reflected there?
That there is video available for this transaction.
The next financial transaction is at 7/14 of 2011, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And Detective Falk, when you were putting together this spreadsheet, were you trying to reflect every transaction that you had information about from the records that you received from the banks related to Amanda Hayes, Grant Hayes, as well as any receipts that were recovered?
Yes, ma'am.
So at 7/14 in 2011, at 1:12 a.m., what transaction do you reflect there?
That's a purchase using RBC Visa card 4655 made at the BP store located at 6501 Glenwood Avenue.
And you've got BP 108, and you've got Wildor Inc. What does that refer to?
That Wildor is the parent company of that store. It's the company that owns that particular store.
And are you aware that there's a BP gas station that is located at 6501 Glenwood Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you give the jury some idea of where that is in relation to the defendant's apartment?
Sure. It's in the same vicinity as the Chick-fil-A, so it's in the vicinity of Glenwood and Millbrook Avenue. So still approximately about 5 minutes from the defendant's apartment.
And on this occasion, you've indicated that there was a purchase in the amount of $29.18.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was actually placed on a Visa credit card, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've got Grant, beside that transaction. Was that, card ending in 4655, was that actually, issued to Grant Hayes?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the situation with regard to a receipt and video for this transaction?
There was none available.
And so there was not any receipt that was recovered, as part of the search of the Durango or the, apartment, but there also was not one that was provided by the business in this case, is that right?
That's correct. The only way we knew about the transaction was through the bank records that we obtained.
And that was something that you would follow up with these individual businesses and see if there was a, receipt or video that were available?
Yes, ma'am.
At 7:14, so that, at 1:27 a.m., what transaction do you show at that time?
At 127, there was a ATM withdrawal at the Black Flower, located at 517 West Peace Street, in the amount of $102.50.
And that, withdrawal from the ATM, was that from Grant Hayes's, Visa card?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to recover a, receipt in that regard?
I was able to recover a receipt from the ATM vendor, a record that they had.
And was there any video that was associated with that transaction?
No, ma'am.
As part of this investigation, did you actually, go to the business, the Black Flower?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were able to see that there was a, ATM machine there?
Yes, ma'am.
The $102.50, did you determine $2.50 was actually a transaction, fee that said the person would actually have received the $100?
That's correct.
2 minutes later, at that same ATM, does that reflect a second withdrawal from a ATM?
Yes, ma'am.
And again, was that on the Visa card, that was issued to Grant Hayes ending in 4655?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the amount of that withdrawal?
So a $40 withdrawal with the same $2.50 fee.
And the, Black Flower, you've indicated is located on 517 West Peace Street. Where is that in reference to the BP that's on Glenwood Avenue that was the transaction before that?
This is on Peace Street, right at Glenwood Avenue. It's downtown Raleigh or Glenwood South area. I would estimate 5 to 6 miles from the BP location.
The next transactions that you have listed is at 7/14, on 7/14/2011 at 2:32 a.m.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
Is that the Walmart that's located at Briar Creek? Is that the business where this transaction occurred?
Yes, ma'am.
And in order to get to the Walmart from the Black Flower, would you actually go down Glenwood Avenue and pass the turnoff where you would go to the defendant's apartment?
That would be the most logical route. Yes, ma'am.
And what did your information reflect with regard to the purchase at the Walmart?
There was a purchase made there at that date and time, 7/14/2011, 2:32 a.m. And it was a cash purchase. And again, the initially how we discovered that purchase was through the SAW manual.
And that led you to the video?
Yes, ma'am. There's video associated with that.
And were you able actually to also recover a receipt which would indicate what items were purchased at 2:32 besides the SAW itself?
Yes, ma'am. We got a receipt from that store, that Walmart.
At 7/14/2011, the next entry you have is RBC Bank.
Yes, ma'am.
And with regard to the time, you have a question mark there.
That's correct.
Can you describe for the jury what this entry, where you got the information related to this entry?
This deposit was from a deposit slip that we obtained that we got when we obtained the bank records from RBC Bank. The reason there's a question mark there is there's no time associated with that transaction.
And what was the address of the RBC Bank where the deposit was made?
It was just denoted as the Kinston Plaza Boulevard in Kinston.
And the deposit was made into what account?
It's a joint account, RBC joint account with Amanda and Grant Hayes.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm sorry, I wrote the same number. Make that two. Okay, Falk, I'm handing you what has been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 581 and 582. You recognize State's Exhibit 581?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And what is that?
A deposit slip that we received when we got the bank records from RBC Bank.
And is that deposit slip, is that the one for 7/14/2011 reflecting a $350 deposit?
From 714, yes, ma'am.
And is that the one we've just been talking about this line on your spreadsheet?
Yes, ma'am.
And with regard to State's Exhibit 582, do you recognize what that is?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is State's Exhibit 582?
This is a cash-in ticket. Again, we received it from the bank records from RBC. Just shows that it was a cash deposit.
And is it associated with the deposit slip in 581?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, I'll move it to introduce into evidence State's Exhibit 581 and 582.
Move it receive.
I thought with regard to State's Exhibit 581, can you describe the information that was provided on there in the bank record?
Yes, ma'am. The deposit slip, Exhibit 581, is dated July 14, 2011. It's a cash deposit for $350. It shows the name Grant Hayes with no address and shows the city, Raleigh, North Carolina, and it gives a checking account number. The cash-in ticket associated with that shows the same amount, $350, and it says RBC Bank, Kinston Plaza Boulevard, Kinston, North Carolina.
And so that checking deposit, you indicated that the name that's written on there is Grant Hayes. That's printed on there?
Yes, ma'am.
And with regard to the line for the address, is there anything that's filled in on the
No.
address?
No, ma'am.
And so it basically says Grant Hayes and Raleigh. Is that right?
Raleigh, North Carolina. Yes, ma'am.
And the checking account number has been written in under checking account. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so the $350 deposit that was made at the Kinston RBC branch on that date was a cash deposit for $350.
Yes, ma'am.
And you indicated, or did you indicate whether or not you contacted RBC Bank to find out if there was any video or information available outside of the bank record that you have in front of you?
We did do that, and there was no video available.
And so from that, you were not able to tell who made the deposit, is that right?
That's correct. We just know that that name is written on there. We don't know who actually made the deposit.
Turn your attention back to State's Exhibit 523, your spreadsheet.
Yes, ma'am.
On July the 14th of 2011 at 5:31, you have reflected a transaction. Where did that take place?
That was at the Target store located at 4841 Grove Barton Road.
And was that a purchase at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And how was that paid for?
That was paid using the RBC Visa card ending in 4663.
And that that card was issued to whom?
Amanda Hayes.
And what was the amount of the purchase?
$59.91.
And was there a receipt recovered or provided by the business?
We did get one from the store, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this was not a receipt that was recovered as part of the search of Amanda Hayes or the search of the apartment.
That's correct.
And was there video associated with that purchase?
Yes, ma'am.
At the next transaction that's shown is occurring on 7/14/2011 at 8:45 p.m. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And what business is involved in that transaction?
That is at the Apple store located at Crabtree Valley Mall, which is at 4325 Glenwood Avenue.
And was there a receipt and video recovered related to that?
Yes, ma'am.
And was the receipt actually recovered in the apartment?
It was, yes, ma'am.
And in terms of that, was that a purchase in cash?
It was, yes, ma'am.
And does that show Grant Hayes being the one that's making that purchase?
Correct.
You've indicated that was at Crabtree Valley Mall. The Target store at Grove Barton Road, the transaction immediately preceding that?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is that Target located in relation to the defendant's apartment?
The Target store is right in the same vicinity as the defendant's apartment. Both the defendant's apartment and the Target store in the vicinity of Glenwood Avenue and Lynn Road.
On 7/14/2011 at 10:23 p.m., did you show a financial transaction?
Yes, ma'am.
And what information did you obtain about that?
That was information obtained from the RBC bank records, and it was for a Vesta Corporation.
And what was the amount of that purchase, or you listed as a withdrawal? What was that?
It showed up on the bank records. It's denoted on the bank records as a withdrawal, and it's for $64.05.
And under what account was that withdrawn from?
It was using the RBC Visa card 4663.
Which was issued to whom?
Amanda Hayes.
And were you able to look into what that Vesta, what that is?
Yes, ma'am. That's a company that processes payments for prepaid cell phones.
At 10:41 p.m. on July the 14th of 2011, did you show a transaction at the Kangaroo?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that a gas station?
It is, yes, ma'am.
And is that located on Creedmoor Road?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to identify that as a purchase with Grant Hayes' RBC Visa card?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that in the amount of $41.58?
Yes, ma'am.
Was there any video or receipt that was recovered related to that transaction?
No, ma'am.
The next entry is for July the 15th of 2011. Was this another deposit at RBC Bank?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was this bank located?
That is at the Pleasant Valley office here in Raleigh.
And was this a deposit into that same account that had been listed earlier on the 14th?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the amount of the deposit in this case?
$600.
And was there any video or receipt associated with this?
No, ma'am.
Where did you get the information for this entry?
From the bank records from RBC Bank.
First witness.
You may.
At the file, I'm handing you what has been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 583 and 584. Ask you to look at those. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 583?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that?
That's the deposit slip associated with that deposit for $600 on July 15th.
And with regard to State's Exhibit 584, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
That's the cash-in ticket associated with that same deposit.
And these are both records that you received pursuant to court order relating to the bank records?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, this time the state will move to introduce into evidence State's Exhibit 583 and 584.
I move so.
With regard to State's Exhibit 583, Detective Falk, what information is provided on that deposit slip that you received from RBC Bank?
It shows the date of July 15, 2011, the name of Grant Hayes, the address of 4021 Bella Park Trail in Raleigh, and it shows that it was a $600 cash deposit.
And State's Exhibit 584 is just the documentation that it was a cash-in deposit for the bank
Yes, ma'am.
as opposed to a check?
Yes, ma'am.
And on this particular deposit slip, the Bella Park address is filled out in full. It's not just the city that's listed.
That's correct.
And that again is the RBC that's located at the Pleasant Valley office.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know where that is?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is it?
It's on Pleasant Valley Road. It's in the vicinity. It's near that Chick-fil-A and near the BP and the Walmart right there in the vicinity of Glenwood Avenue and Pleasant Valley Road.
Now and again, were you able to associate a time with that deposit?
No, ma'am. It shows no time associated with that.
And was that something that you tried to investigate further with regard to the bank?
Yes, ma'am.
And were they able to give you any time information?
Yeah, with each of these deposits on this spreadsheet, I tried to get video and a time, and they didn't have any record of either one of those.
With regard to July the 15th of 2011 at 12:25 p.m., did you show a transaction at a Walmart on Glenwood Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this actually a Walmart that's located at 6600 Glenwood Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
And so is that a different Walmart than the one at Briar Creek?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is this Walmart located?
That's in the Town Ridge Shopping Center, which is at 6600 Glenwood Avenue in the vicinity of Pleasant Valley Road and Glenwood Avenue.
So the RBC Bank at Pleasant Valley would be near this Walmart?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you find out with regard to that transaction?
That it was a cash purchase in the amount of $166.53.
And was there video associated with that purchase?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you receive a receipt?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that a receipt that was provided by the business as opposed to one that you found discovered in this investigation?
That's correct.
On July the 15th of 2011 at 4:30 p.m., there's a transaction that's identified as occurring at the Sheets in Wilson. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that purchase made with the RBC Visa card assigned to Grant Hayes?
Yes, ma'am.
And the amount of that purchase was $49.20?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that, that's the receipt that you actually recovered from Grant Hayes, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there video showing that Grant Hayes actually making that purchase?
Yes, ma'am.
And the next line is apparently at 556 at the same sheets, a $33.64 purchase, is that right?
Correct.
And again, that was made by Visa card ending in 4655, which was issued to Grant Hayes.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is a receipt that you actually received from the business, is that right?
That's correct.
And the same video depicts that purchase as well, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
On July the 16th at 6:48 a.m., there's a purchase at the Walmart, and this is back at the Briar Creek Walmart, is that right?
That's correct.
And what information did you have about that transaction?
That it was a cash purchase in the amount of $61.45 made on that date and time that you just said, July 16, 2011 at 6:48 a.m.
And some 20 minutes later, did you show two additional transactions at that same Walmart?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you show?
There was a return at 7:10 a.m. of some merchandise that had been previously purchased. And then at 7:12 a.m. there was a purchase in the amount of $53.25.
And those were both cash purchases?
Yes.
And there was video available. Did they show Grant Hayes actually making those purchases?
Yes.
On the 16th at 9:17 a.m., is there a Netflix purchase?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that done on the card that had been issued to Grant Hayes?
Yes, ma'am.
And then on the 16th at 1:14 p.m., do you show a transaction at the Pet Boys located in Garner?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have information that there were several transactions there at the Pet Boys around that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you describe with regard to that first purchase what information you had?
The first one was a purchase at 1:14 p.m. on July 16th in the amount of 81 cents. The next one, same date and time, in the amount of 81 cents. And the third one was at 1:42 p.m., a cash purchase in the amount of $458.67.
Now, with regard to these, the purchases that were made on the two 81-cent purchases, were they made with regard to credit card purchases?
Yes, ma'am.
And were they two different cards that were both issued to Grant Hayes?
Well, I know just by viewing the video that Grant made those purchases, and we were able to get receipt information from Pep Boys that showed those two card numbers, I believe, and it was actually for the purchase of a bottle of water.
And then the larger purchase of $458, that was actually in cash?
That's correct.
Immediately following that, you show on July the 16th of 2011 at 3:18, I said immediately following, the next transaction at the U-Haul located on Capitol Boulevard.
Yes, ma'am.
And what information do you have with regard to the transaction at the U-Haul Capitol Boulevard?
It was a purchase using the card in the name of Grant Hayes in the amount of $287.14 from the U-Haul at 716 Capitol Boulevard.
And is that, you had a receipt and video that were available with regard to that?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that show actually Grant Hayes there, and then I believe the jury's seen that in the U-Haul store?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
At 3:45 in the afternoon of the 16th, was there a transaction or two transactions at the Walmart on Glenwood Avenue? And again, this would be the one that was closer in, not the Briar Creek Walmart.
Correct.
And what happened at 3:45 p.m.?
That was a return in the amount of $55.51.
And sometime shortly thereafter, was there a purchase at that same location at the Walmart?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the amount of that purchase?
$102.69.
And was that a cash purchase?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there video and a receipt available for those?
Yes, ma'am.
On the 16th of July at 8:10 p.m., did you show some purchases at the Target located at Grove Barton Road?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was what information did you have about those transactions?
The there were two. One at 8:10 p.m. was at that Target, and that was information initially gleaned from the receipt recovered from Amanda Hayes. It was for the cash purchase of two coolers in the amount of $97.87. The next transaction was a purchase, also a cash purchase, in the amount of $15.23 at the same store at 8:29 p.m.
And you indicated that the purchase, the initial purchase for the coolers, that receipt was actually found on Amanda Hayes at the time of the search warrant on July 22nd?
Correct.
And both of these purchases were in cash, and there was video that showed Grant Hayes making the purchases.
Correct.
Right. On 7/16/2011 at 11:12 p.m., the Walmart on Glenwood Avenue, and again, this is the one that's closer in, not the one at Briar Creek. Did you reflect the purchase at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that made on a Visa card that had been issued to Grant Hayes?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that for $39.30?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you have a receipt and video available indicating that Grant Hayes is the one that made that transaction?
Yes, ma'am.
After that, that being July the 16th of 2011 at 11:12 p.m., is the next transaction you show actually in the state of Alabama?
Yes, ma'am.
So the last transaction before that one is at the Walmart at 11:12 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
What information did you have about a Motel 6 transaction on July the 17th of 2011?
That came from the receipt that was recovered at the address on Skinner Lane in Texas, and it was for that date, July 17th. It was at that Motel 6 in Alabama, and it was a cash purchase in the amount of $44.24.
That information came to you by recovery of the receipt at Karen Berry's house there on her computer table.
Correct.
And so it was a cash receipt, so this was not information that you got from the bank records.
That's correct.
Following that transaction, do you show a number of transactions at the Circle K in Alabama?
Yes, ma'am.
And is the first of those occurring at 7:14 p.m. on 7/17/2011?
Yes, ma'am.
And what information did you have about, and is the last one at 7:23 p.m.?
Yes, it is.
And so were there three purchases there?
Yes, sir.
And can you describe each of those purchases?
Yes, ma'am. These, again, were from the bank records, and it just shows the dates and times there. On 7/17/2011, one at 7:14 p.m., one at 7:17 p.m., one at 7:23 p.m. They were each, the first two actually were purchases made using the card issued to Grant Hayes, one for $75, one for $74.76. And then the third one was a purchase made using the card issued to Amanda Hayes for $18.02.
Did you have any receipts or videos that were associated with those transactions?
No, ma'am.
On 7/17 at 10:23 p.m., so about 3 hours later, were there some additional financial transactions?
Yes, ma'am.
And did they take place at the Shell station?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was in Diamond Head, Mississippi?
Yes, ma'am.
What information did you have about those purchases some 3 hours later?
Both were made using the card issued to Grant Hayes. One was for $85 and one was for $25.39.
And that was at 10:23 p.m. and 10:24 p.m. on the 17th?
Correct.
Is the next transaction occur on the 18th of July?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that at an Exxon station?
Yes, ma'am.
Or is it identified at Exxon ShopRite?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the location of that business?
Crowley, Louisiana.
And that was at 1:48 a.m. and 1:55 a.m.?
Correct.
And what were the transactions at that time?
The first one was a purchase using the card issued to Grant Hayes in the amount of $91. The second was a purchase using the same card in the amount of $47.90.
On July the 19th, do you show deposits at the RBC Bank?
Yes, ma'am.
And are they in the amount of $500 and $200?
Yes, ma'am.
And as part of this investigation, were you able to determine that Shay Elmer had actually made those deposits?
Yes, ma'am. And it's not denoted on this spreadsheet, but they were actually made at that same Pleasant Valley location, and they were made by Shay Elmer.
So those were in Raleigh at the Pleasant Valley RBC Bank.
Yes, ma'am.
The next transaction being on the 19th of July at 10:24 a.m. Indicated at the Home Depot. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's the Home Depot that's located on Fry Road in Katy, Texas.
That's correct.
And at that time, is there a cash purchase in the amount of $69.43?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were able to obtain video and a receipt related to that transaction?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this the, actually the video which shows Grant Hayes and the Home Depot purchasing the muriatic acid and the gloves
That's correct.
and the trash can?
Yes, ma'am.
At 10:38 a.m., you show a withdrawal or an attempted withdrawal?
An attempt. Yes, ma'am.
And is that at an ATM located at 6801 South Fry Road in Katy, Texas?
Yes, ma'am.
And you know that to be, that Home Depot and that Bank of America ATM to be fairly close to one another, both on Fry Road?
Yes, ma'am.
And what information did you have about the 10:38 a.m. Attempted withdrawal?
Based on the video, we know that Amanda Hayes was the one who made that withdrawal attempt, and it was using the card that was issued to her, ending in 4663.
And the fact that there was a withdrawal that was denied, was that information from the bank records?
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
What happens a minute later at 10:39 a.m.?
There's a balance inquiry made by Amanda, and again, that's based on the bank records.
Now, the withdrawal that was denied, what was the amount that she attempted to withdraw at that time?
$503.
And then there's a balance inquiry, and then at 10:39, is there a withdrawal that actually goes through?
Yes, ma'am.
And how much is the amount for that withdrawal?
For $200, and it says 203. That's a $200 withdrawal plus a $3 fee.
And that also is reflected on the video that you had Mr. Reed seen from that ATM in Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's the morning, 10:39 a.m. Later that same day, being July the 19th at 5:47 p.m., is there another attempt to withdraw money from an ATM in Texas?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's the location of this ATM?
That's at 8102 West Grand Parkway in Richmond, Texas.
much is attempted to be withdrawn at that time?
Again, attempt to withdraw $500 with that, and then there's that $3 fee associated with it.
And the next, and that's at Grand Parkway in Richmond, Texas, at 12:08 p.m. on the 20th. Is that same ATM access?
Correct.
And what happens on that occasion?
That's a successful withdrawal of that $500 using the card issued to Amanda Hayes, and based on the video, we know that it was Amanda Hayes who made that withdrawal.
At 7/20/2011, at 3:10 p.m., did you show a transaction at a Chevron station?
Yes, ma'am.
And where is that Chevron station located?
Winnie, Texas.
And is that a credit card purchase at that location?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that in the amount of $126?
Yes, ma'am.
And that credit card is issued, is 4655, the one that's issued to Grant Hayes?
Correct.
And a minute later at that same location, is there a second transaction using that same credit card?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that for $26.57?
Yes, ma'am.
On the 21st of July 2011 at 3:13 a.m.,
Yes, ma'am.
do you show a financial transaction at Pilot?
At a Pilot store located in Noonan, Georgia.
Is that a gas station?
I believe so.
And are there actually two transactions at that location?
Yes, ma'am.
And one for $76 and one for $74.65?
Correct.
And they were both done on the Visa that was issued to Grant Hayes?
Correct.
On July the 21st, 2011 at 3:56 a.m., what transaction do you reflect at that time?
It appears to be a fee for $1.50 associated with some sort of internet connection.
And that is also in Noonan, Georgia?
That's correct.
And basically, that is all the information that's contained on your spreadsheet, which states identified as 523. Were there any further transactions that were reflected on the bank records after July the 21st of 2011?
No, ma'am.
Now, Detective Falk, did you basically go back with regard to these various transactions for which you had receipts or video and identify the items that were purchased at each of these, on each of these transactions?
For the ones that we had information on, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so each one of these, you would not, if you didn't have a receipt, you would not be able to identify what items were purchased.
That's correct.
And in terms of, did you prepare another spreadsheet which laid out that information?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you also identify whether or not those particular items had been recovered as part of this investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Detective Falk, I'm handing you what has been marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 522. And ask if you recognize that.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 522?
It's the spreadsheet you just spoke of that shows particular items that were purchased from various locations that were referenced in the other spreadsheet.
And on this spreadsheet, you actually have a column that indicates receipt item, is that right?
Correct.
And that would indicate the items that were purchased.
Yes, ma'am.
You also have a column that lists the product number
Yes, ma'am.
and the price.
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the photo column? What does that depict?
Whether we have a photo available associated with that particular item.
And what is the final column?
Whether that particular item was recovered during the investigation of this case.
introduced into evidence text exhibit 522 and ask that it be published.
Vote be received. You may publish. Thank you.
Detective Falk, you have text exhibit 522 in front of you.
Yes, ma'am.
With regard to the first date that's listed on here, which is July the 14th of 2011 at 2:32 a.m. at that Walmart that's located at Briar Creek, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is a cash purchase that you've noted earlier that this jury's seen a video of, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that video, Grant Hayes is shown making various purchases, is that right? Or a purchase of various items, I guess?
Correct.
Okay. What items were purchased at that time?
A pair of 3M goggles, a scale reciprocating saw, some waste bags, some sheeting, a 4mm tarp, some gloves, a skill saw blade, and another blade.
And as part of your involvement in this investigation, did you, at a later date, go back and actually purchase the very same skill saw in terms of the same product number, an identical skill saw?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the purpose of you going back to purchase that particular item?
For additional testing that was going to be conducted by Dr. Ann Ross at NC State.
And you indicated at the time that this skill saw was purchased, that there were also additional blades that were purchased?
Correct.
And were you able to also purchase these additional blades that Grant Hayes had purchased on July the 14th? Were you able to purchase identical blades?
One of them we were. Actually, the last blade you see listed there was a clearance item, so they didn't have any more. So we were not able to purchase that one.
And so the one extra blade, which I think is the skill blade that's listed at $4.94, you were able to purchase an identical one of those.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you took the reciprocating saw as well as that, which came with two blades, is that right?
That's correct.
As well as that skill blade, and transferred all of that to Dr. Ross for her testing.
Yes, ma'am.
With regard to the final column here, recovery, were you able to recover any of these items in the trash?
Yes, ma'am.
And what specifically did you recover?
The pair of goggles, 3M goggles.
July the 14th of 2011, which would be that same day, but later in the afternoon at 5:31 p.m., did you show a purchase at the Target on Grove Barton Road near the defendant's apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
And that purchase was made with a card ending in 4663 issued to Amanda Hayes.
That's correct.
And is this a video? Were you able to obtain a video with regard to this?
Yes, ma'am.
And does that video show Amanda Hayes as the one that made these purchases?
Yes, it does.
What items did she purchase on July the 14th of 2011 at 5:31 p.m.?
She purchased a bottle of bleach, a pack of Scott Bath tissue, 2 packages of gloves, electrical tape. It's a Target brand. That Up brand is a Target brand cleaner, and a lint roller.
And you indicated the bleach and the cleaner eraser were Target brand.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the cleaner eraser? Did you have a chance to go to Target and actually look at that product and see what that was?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe that for the jury?
It's just a, best of my recollection, is just a pad of sort that's used to clean, whether it be stains or just clean up any spills or anything. Just a cleaning pad.
Is it used or described as something that can be used to get scuff marks off the wall and that type of thing?
Yes, ma'am.
And you indicated electrical tape was also purchased at this time?
Yes, ma'am.
And a lint roller. Can you describe the lint roller that you were able to identify by that product number?
The one associated with that product number was a large size lint roller. And again, the best of my recollection, it said on there the advertisement was for large areas.
And with regard to the photo, you were able to, by product number, kind of pull all these products and take photos of them?
Yes. Well, actually, CCBI did.
Okay. And were any of these items recovered in the trash?
There were 2 packages of gloves that were purchased, and one we recovered one for one of the pairs of yellow gloves that were purchased.
With regard to going to the next purchase now, so that one was at 531 at the Target on Grove Barton Road, July the 14th. That involved Amanda Hayes, that you see her on the video making those purchases.
Yes, ma'am.
On that same day at 8:45 p.m., is there a transaction at the Apple store located on Glenwood Avenue?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's purchased at the Apple store at that time?
It's an Apple 85-watt power adapter.
And you've indicated with regard to recovery with MacBook on 5/9/13.
Yes, ma'am.
What information did you have about that power adapter?
We knew that he purchased, or we could tell from the transaction that Grant Hayes purchased a power adapter, and we were able to recover one on 5/9/13 when we recovered a MacBook computer. There was one of the same type with that computer.
And did you learn during the course of this investigation that the MacBook computer was actually sold on Craigslist?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to track down the person to whom that computer was sold?
Yes, ma'am.
And had that been listed by Grant Hayes for sale during the course of this week, being July the 13th?
Yes, ma'am.
And so at the time that you recovered the MacBook that Grant Hayes had sold, it had a power adapter with it, is that right?
That's correct.
And you can't say it's the exact one, but it was with the one that he sold.
That's correct.
And was that sold after July the 14th of 2011?
Yes.
And was it during that same week?
It was. I don't have right in front of me the exact date, but
And was that prior to Grant Hayes and Amanda Hayes going to Texas?
yes.
And at the time that it was recovered, being that computer on 5/9/2013, were you able to get any information off that computer that was relevant to this investigation in terms of any information that may have been stored or any searches or anything?
We did do a search of it, but there was no information recovered that we deemed important in this investigation.
Did it appear that all of the information that was on that computer is something that had been placed on it after it had been sold by whoever bought it?
Yes.
On July the 15th of 2011, Did you investigate a transaction in cash that occurred at 12:25 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
And again, this is the Walmart that was located at 6600 Glenwood Avenue.
Yes, ma'am.
What was purchased at that time?
There were 6 duffel bags that were purchased.
And with regard to those duffel bags, were they recovered, or were you able to identify where they ended up?
None were recovered, and 3 of the 6 that were purchased were returned later.
So you show that they were purchased on July the 15th. Were they returned, 3 of them returned the following day, July the 16th?
Yes, ma'am.
On July the 16th, at the Walmart located on Glenwood Avenue, this is the 10,050 Glenwood Avenue, which is the Briar Creek Walmart, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So at 6:48 that morning, were there several items that were purchased in cash?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you able to, did you have video that indicated who had made that purchase?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was that?
Grant Hayes.
And what was purchased in the morning of 7/16/2011?
3 10-pound bags of ice and a 120-quart cooler. I'm sorry, yes, that's correct. The 120-quart cooler was purchased, but then it was returned on a later date.
So in the morning, 6:48 in the morning on the July the 16th of 2011, the 3 10-pound bags of ice and the 120-quart cooler were purchased at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you recover ice bags as part of the investigation into the trash?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you recover, how many bags of ice did you recover, empty bags?
I think we in total recovered 5 or 6, but at least 3.
You had indicated that, well, let me ask about this. On July the 16th of 2011, about 20 minutes later, at that same Walmart, being the one at Briar Creek, was there a return made?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and these were, what was returned at that time?
3 of those duffel bags that had been purchased the day before.
So they actually were purchased at one Walmart and returned to the other Walmart?
Correct.
And were you able to tell that Grant Hayes was the one that was involved in returning those duffel bags?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was from the video?
Yes, ma'am.
At that same, or a few minutes after that, on 7/16 at the Walmart at Briar Creek, was there something else that was purchased?
On 7:12 a.m., there was a 75-quart cooler purchased.
And was that recovered as part of this investigation, that 75-quart cooler?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was it recovered?
Recovered in Texas.
So it was purchased on July the 16th, and it was recovered in Texas on July the 25th?
Correct.
At 3:45 p.m. On 7/16, going back to the Walmart that was located not at the Briar Creek but further up Glenwood Avenue, what happened at that time?
The 120-quart cooler that was purchased on or earlier that day was returned at 3:45 p.m.
So this was a 120-quart cooler?
Correct.
It had been purchased earlier in the day from the Briar Creek Walmart,
Yes, ma'am.
and it was returned to the one at 6600 Glenwood Avenue at 3:45.
Yes, ma'am.
What purchases did Grant make at 407 at that same Walmart, at 6600 Glenwood Avenue?
He purchased a 120-quart cooler of the same type, a padlock, and a Cobra brand CB radio.
And when you say a 120-quart cooler of the same type, did it have the same product number as the one that he returned?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that 120 quart cooler that was purchased on July the 16th of 2011 at 407 at the Walmart, was that recovered?
Yes, ma'am.
And when and where was it recovered?
In Texas on July 25th, 2011.
You indicated there was also a padlock purchased at this time?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you recover that padlock or the packaging from that padlock?
We recovered the packaging from the trash search on July 29th, 2011.
So that was the trash search that was conducted here in Raleigh?
Correct.
The Cobra CB,
Yes, ma'am.
that's a CB radio.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that recovered as part of this investigation?
No, ma'am.
On July the 16th of 2011 at 8:10 p.m., the Target located on Grove Barton Road, was there a purchase?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was purchased at that time?
Those were 2 coolers.
And was this the receipt that was located in Amanda Hayes' purse at the time that she was served?
Yes, ma'am.
And so this was for the 2 coolers for July the 16th. Were those coolers recovered as part of this investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And where and when were they recovered?
They were recovered at 1505 Holman Street in Kinston on July 25th, 2011.
And July the 25th of 2011, was that the time of Grant and Amanda Hayes' arrest?
Correct.
On July the 16th of 2011 at 8:29 p.m., the same Target located on Grove Barton Road,
Yes, ma'am.
what was purchased at that time?
Some Glad trash bags, a toilet brush, and a towel.
And were those items, any of those items recovered as part of this investigation?
We recovered some of the same types of bags from the trash, and also the packaging for that type of bag from the trash search on July 29th.
And the trash search has been described with the trash being poured out, and that you all went through various items of trash bags, is that right?
Correct.
And so a number of these items that were recovered were actually inside trash bags?
Yes, ma'am.
And were they all these Glad Force Flex trash bags?
Yes, ma'am.
Those purchases from the Target on Grove Barton Road, the coolers, and then later the Glad trash bags, the toilet brush, and the hand towel, were they all made, were they all cash purchases?
Yes.
And were they made by Grant Hayes?
Yes. Yes.
On July the 19th of 2011, did you show a purchase at from the Katy, Texas Home Depot?
Yes, ma'am.
And again, this was a cash purchase by Grant Hayes, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
What items were recovered in that purchase?
From that purchase, we recovered the muriatic acid that was purchased and the gloves that were purchased. Or, I'm sorry, packaging for the gloves that were purchased.
Okay, so basically everything was recovered except for the gloves themselves and the trash can?
Correct.
And this reflects four boxes of the muriatic acid, is that right?
4 boxes, and each box contained 2 bottles.
And the muriatic acid, that's what was recovered at the end of Skinner Lane by Deputy Snyder, is that right?
Correct.
All right, Ms. Holt, it's about 10 after 1. Let's stop for lunch. Folks, just leave those in your chair along with your notes, and we'll pick that up after lunch. Keep an open mind. Don't form or express any opinion about any matter of controversy. And follow my previous instructions. Come on back in about an hour, about 2:15, and we'll try to pick it up at 2:15. Have a good lunch. See you at 2:15. Thank you.